I knew something was off the second Grant Lorman walked into the conference room with that smug, Silicon Valley smirk plastered on his face like it had stock options. He didn't sit. He just stood there, tapping a Mont Blanc pen like he was counting down to a punchline I wasn't gonna laugh at. My badge still hung around my neck. My system access still worked. But his tone made it clear I was already gone. "You've been an asset," he said, with all the sincerity of a botched robocall. "But your salary is a luxury. We'll let a cheaper team handle the data." And just like that, 10 years of flawless financial stewardship got wiped off the whiteboard. He nodded toward a Zoom screen filled with outsourced analysts in matching polos like a damn financial Power Rangers reboot. Then he pushed a manila envelope across the glass table like it was a favor, not a mistake. I opened it. Standard exit, signed without flinching. No scene, no tears, just a quiet nod. But I looked him in the eye and said it slowly, so it'd stick. Only one version of truth exists, and it's not the one in your pitch deck. Hey, quick pause. If you're listening and stories like this grab you, do us a solid, hit that subscribe button and throw a like on this video. 97% of people never do, and it helps the team more than you'd think. All right, back to it. See, I wasn't just a spreadsheet jockey. I was the checksum, the silent architect, the control layer behind 6 regions, 8 banks, 3 regulators, and enough conditional logic to make your hair curl. The dashboards investors drooled over, I built the data pipelines that fed them. The audit history that kept credit lines wide open, mine. The financial control ledger that validated everything from warehouse insurance premiums to IPO projections. All routed through my hash seal, buried 5 layers deep in encrypted protocol. That ledger wasn't just numbers, it was reputation, trust, the beating heart of continuity. But Grant didn't get that, or didn't care. Probably both. He was one of those agile transformation guys who thinks legacy means outdated, not bulletproof. He used words like efficiency and modernization like holy water, trying to exorcise the ghost of people like me, the ones who quietly kept the machine from flying apart. The worst part? I didn't even argue. That's the kind of betrayal that doesn't deserve yelling. It deserves distance. I handed over my laptop, cleared out my desk, left a note in the version history, termination executed. No continuity guaranteed beyond this commit. Then I walked out. Past the interns who still thought data hygiene was about dashboards. Past the marketing director who once asked if an audit trail could be lightly edited for tone. Past Grant, still grinning like he'd just solved something. I didn't look back, but I knew, deep down, that version of truth they were about to build without me, it was already broken. Because here's what Grant never learned in all his mergers and IPO showboating. Trust doesn't scale, and truth doesn't tolerate shortcuts. I wasn't bitter. I was just done. But the system wasn't. The ledger doesn't forget. And the checksum doesn't forgive. The first week out, I didn't so much as flinch. My mornings were quiet for the first time in years. No 4 a.m. ping from risk compliance, no frantic calls from regional controllers trying to reconcile decimal drift across 3 time zones. I took walks, read books with cracked spines and uncached bookmarks, slept past dawn, and yet, somewhere deep beneath all that stillness, I could feel the system breathing wrong. I didn't email anyone, didn't schedule a farewell call. I followed off-boarding protocol like it was gospel, logged the credential handoffs, submitted my termination declaration, outlined key procedural voids. Then, privately, I submitted one last memo, sent it straight to the audit committee's shared folder with an automatic read receipt. It wasn't angry, wasn't dramatic, just stated the facts. Financial control lineage was being handed to a team without certified custodianship. The integrity chain was broken. The ledger continuity, if altered, would nullify several legal attestations tied to our external audit history. No response, no ping, no acknowledgement. A week later, I checked the access logs. My credentials had been revoked, just like they should have been. But the memo never opened. Meanwhile, Grant was out there on earnings calls, smiling like a man who just sold air and called it progress. "We've moved to a faster, leaner analytics infrastructure," he told one group of stakeholders. "No more slow data bottlenecks, real-time dashboards. AI-driven reconciliation. Bottleneck. That word sat in my chest like a nail. I wasn't a bottleneck. I was the lock on the vault. The reason banks extended revolving credit without flinching. The person who embedded failover logic across every regional ledger and timestamped it with a hash chain only I could verify. But he wanted shine. He wanted speed. So he picked a vendor with a slick website and a nice logo and handed them the keys to a kingdom they didn't understand. I read their bios. None of them had worked on anything bigger than a cap table cleanup. One had blockchain enthusiast in his LinkedIn headline. Another listed Excel wizard as a skill. Cute. Then I saw the press release. Legacy structures are being modernized by our elite data transition team. We're excited to move beyond outdated frameworks and into a new era of intelligent analytics. Outdated frameworks. That phrase made me laugh. Not because it was wrong, but because it was careless. Grant didn't know what those legacy structures actually were. He thought they were spreadsheets, interfaces. He didn't understand the protocol beneath, the embedded trust mechanisms, the recursive checksum layers, the signed integrity index that gave our numbers credibility with banks, regulators, insurers. Those weren't artifacts. They were alive and now unmonitored. But I wasn't bitter. I was done. I stopped emailing, stopped checking the logs, deleted the Slack app, turned off calendar notifications, and still, I knew what was coming. Because when you gut a control layer and call it progress, what you're really doing is gambling with someone else's credit. And the moment the ledger hiccups, when even one trailing digit fails to match historical checksum, we all know who the banks will call. And it won't be the new data hygiene crew. So no, I didn't go back. I started watching. Quietly, relentlessly. And the ledger? It started whispering. It started with a whisper, buried in a quarterly review note from a mid-tier regional bank out of Indiana. One line, 12 words. Historical figures do not align with previously verified audit trail figures. To anyone else, it would have looked like a typo, a decimal drift, maybe a lag in data ingestion. But to me, it was the start of the storm. By the time I read the industry bulletin buried in the back-end reconciliation issues section, it was already 5 institutions deep. Another flagged a variance in rolling 12-month EBITDA between what had been verified last year and what now appeared in the portal dashboards. The kicker? They'd all pulled from the same live system that had replaced mine. That meant someone, likely several someones, had overwritten a validated data tier. Bad enough. But worse? They didn't know they had. The new crew was operating blind, oblivious to the control tags, the historic reconciliation lock points, the auto-generated snapshot triggers I'd embedded over the years. What they saw as old code was in fact a forensic shield. You remove it, the structure floats. And float it did, right into the red. 3 banks, then 5. One after another, they escalated the discrepancies. The usual audit assurances, automated dashboards, financial summaries, the shiny BI charts Grant loved to parade weren't enough anymore. Not without a verified ledger trail. Not without the original reconciliation signed, time-stamped, and matched. Grant wasn't even looped in at first. The questions bypassed finance altogether. They went straight to the board liaison for audit compliance. She, to her credit, didn't try to stall or sugarcoat. Her response, short and lethal. That architecture was managed by Mr. Wallace. He no longer works here. She meant it as a procedural fact. But what the banks heard was, the person responsible for your confidence is gone. The next reply didn't even have punctuation. Then every revolving line is frozen until he does. That was it. No meeting. No call. Just the soft click of capital slamming shut. It didn't make headlines. Yet. But inside, I know the panic spread like wildfire. Credit officers scrambling, legal teams combing through continuity clauses, Treasury trying to calculate how many days they had before payroll got tight. Because this wasn't a missed invoice, this was liquidity, revolvers, the invisible bloodlines that let companies float, shift, and grow. And the reason for the freeze? Not fraud, not theft. Just absence, just one missing checksum. The system was still running, but the banks no longer trusted the numbers. Not because they knew they were wrong, but because they no longer had a person to say they were right. That was the shift. Not a crash, not a bang, just a slow, echoing drift into doubt. And doubt in finance costs more than any mistake ever could. Grant did what men like him always do when the cracks start showing. He spun, called it transitional turbulence, told the board this was normal, expected, even healthy. The system is evolving, he said. We're shaking off legacy dependencies. He used words like optimization, elasticity, adaptability, all while banks were quietly revoking access to capital like it was a contagion. Inside the tower, things stayed polished on the surface. Nothing was said out loud, but the air changed. Legal started whispering in elevators. Treasury locked meeting invites. The data team, Grant's shiny new imports, began showing up earlier, staying later, still somehow never able to produce what the banks needed, because the banks didn't want modern reports. They wanted version logs, ledger hashes. They wanted the attestation layers embedded in the old system, the ones that triggered automatically when the numbers aligned, the ones only I had the keys to validate, and those keys, nowhere to be found. Grant tried to stall, said they were migrating documentation, said the new platform wasn't backward compatible, but the banks weren't buying it. They didn't need compatibility, they needed trust. And in the absence of trust, they wanted proof. Access logs, control lineage, chain of custody attestations, none of which existed post-transition. Because he never executed a formal transfer, never even initiated a handover. I'd left that memo for a reason. I knew what would happen. Knew the ledger wasn't just a set of files. It was a living protocol, one that required a designated steward to maintain continuity of integrity. And the paper trail still had my name all over it. Legal finally cracked open the audit binders from last year. There it was, staring back at them in black and white ink on a notarized packet signed by both Grant and the board, Clause 9C, buried halfway through the continuity appendix. Financial integrity guarantees remain valid only under uninterrupted designated stewardship. And next to the line marked Steward of Ledger Control, my full legal name, certified, unexpired. There had been no clause for delegation, no procedure filed for succession, no signature nullifying the designation, so the banks didn't flinch. They froze, clean, brutal, quiet. It wasn't a fight, it was policy. And now? The credit lines were gone. Asset-based lending halted. Vendor float threatened. Payroll corridors shrinking by the hour. Behind closed doors, someone must have finally asked Grant the one question he couldn't pitch slide his way out of. Did you formally transfer stewardship? And when the answer was no, everything stopped. He still smiled in public, still used that tone, but his suit was looser, his collar tighter. The pauses between his words grew longer. I heard through someone, an old colleague from ops, that Grant started showing up to internal check-ins 30 minutes early, alone, sweating. But the damage wasn't in what had happened. It was in what couldn't be undone. You can't talk your way out of a missing checksum, not when $480 million in liquidity is locked behind a name you erased. They didn't come running at first, at least not where I could see them. Grant, for all his arrogance, probably assumed this could still be spun. A hiccup. A temporary freeze, something he could bluff through with that fake calm PR voice and a few buzzwords about systemic adaptation. But the banks weren't waiting, and time, for once, wasn't on his side. The first contact attempt was an email, sent to my old company address. It bounced. Then came the second. A polite, frantic-sounding message on LinkedIn from a junior auditor I barely remembered. She'd been new, still learning how to spell ledger, always carried a highlighter in her sleeve like it was armor. Her note was short, punctuated like she was holding her breath. Hi, Mr. Wallace, sorry to reach out like this, but they need you to respond. The board's in crisis, please. I read it, twice, and I closed the app, not to be cruel, but because I knew this wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. They'd replaced continuity with cost-cutting, swapped trust for velocity, and now they were staring into the void where the checksum used to be, hoping it might blink first. Inside the tower, it was different now. Grant's charm offensive had collapsed into quiet dread. I wasn't there, but people talk. Old colleagues, silent loyalists. Not all of them drank the Kool-Aid when he took over. Some stayed, some watched, and some whispered. They told me about the emergency sessions, how the finance floor cleared out in waves like a ship with a slow leak. The new data crew, those efficiency experts, were all but locked out of their own dashboards while legal tried to piece together what exactly they were running. Because no one knew, not really, not the access logs, not the backup trail, not the delta checks between reconciled and reported values, just numbers. Pretty, polished, unverified numbers. And the banks had stopped accepting them. Then came the closed-door board session. 12 chairs. One long silence. Until someone, maybe the chair, maybe just the one person still brave enough to say it, asked the question that had been stalking them since the freeze began. Who approved the removal of the only person contractually bound to the integrity of our ledger? The room went dead. No fingers pointed, no charts pulled up, no jargon offered, just one answer. Flat. Small. I did. Grant's voice, no defense, no spin, just the echo of authority wielded without understanding. The sound of someone realizing, too late, that prestige doesn't immunize you from protocol. No one said what they were thinking, but it didn't matter. The silence said it for them. Because this wasn't a breach. This was abandonment. Self-inflicted, signed, dated, and the only person who could fix it was gone. By their own hand. By the time they realized just how deep the fracture ran, the numbers had already started screaming. Vendors stalled payments, short-term float dried up. Treasury tried rerouting from discretionary reserves, but the banks had blocked access to the revolving lines that made up nearly half of their liquidity cushion. A whisper turned into a warning. A warning became a call. Then 5. Investors weren't asking questions, they were sending threats. One firm, holding a convertible note linked to audited quarterly assurances, issued a formal intent to trigger the material breach clause. If executed, it wouldn't just pull their funding. It would claw back part of the last issuance. That clause? It was tied to validated data controls, the ones Grant had assumed would just carry over. And the sum total? $480 million in operational liquidity, on hold, every dime suspended by nothing more than a missing signature and a voided protocol. IT worked round the clock, tried to replicate the previous system. But version forks kept misaligning. Restoration tools tripped. Snapshot hashes failed authentication. Until finally, quietly, someone in infrastructure spoke the truth no one wanted to say out loud. Her credential seals are still the only ones with full ledger continuity. Without them, we can't verify the originals. That sentence alone was a death knell. Legal, in a panic now, pulled my termination file again. Flipped to the final page. Read the last line, probably twice. There it was, time-stamped, signed, attached memo. All custodial authority and continuity validation formally cease at 12 p.m. on the date of separation. No reissuance permitted without formal designation and onboarding per clause 9C. Ironclad. Not angry, not vindictive, just final. They'd let me walk out the door with the one thread still tying their financial legitimacy together. And no one, not Grant, not his crew of dashboard cowboys, not even the board, had noticed until the entire machine started sputtering in front of regulators and risk committees. And now, they were flying blind. No navigation, no backups, no one at the controls. The system still worked, technically. Numbers flowed, dashboards populated, but they were just pictures now. They weren't trusted. Couldn't be, because the ledger, the real one, the verified one, the one that matched 7 years of audits down to the digit, was locked. And the keys were gone. And the regulators? They were circling. Fast. Preliminary notices from the SEC, requests for documentation from the Office of the Comptroller, quiet inquiries from insurance underwriters reviewing risk exposure, all of them asking the same thing. Who's validating your numbers? And for all their emails, their strategy meetings, their damage control memos, there was only one name they could give. Mine. And I wasn't answering. The air in the tower felt different. Colder somehow, like the HVAC had been trying to compensate for the silence no one wanted to break. I hadn't been inside since the day Grant shoved my future into a manila envelope and called it restructuring. Now I was back with my own envelope. And this one wasn't offering a damn thing. It was a lifeline with a timer. I didn't use the main entrance. That door was for people pretending everything was fine. I slipped in through the service side where the contractors and vendors came and went without pretense. A security guard handed me a badge without a word. He recognized me. They all did now. 9:12 a.m., sharp. Up the elevator, down the corridor. The carpet still muffled everything. Voices, footsteps, impact. Outside the boardroom, a woman from legal glanced up. Her eyes widened, not from surprise, but from something closer to dread relief. Like seeing the defibrillator finally arrive, battery humming. No greetings, no small talk. I opened the door myself. The board's special session was already underway. Leather chairs, scowling suits, nervous clicks of pens like a metronome for failure. One of them paused mid-sentence when they saw me. Another leaned back like they'd just seen a ghost they didn't know how to apologize to. I didn't sit. I walked to the center of the table, placed the manila folder down in front of legal, and said calmly, "This will buy you 72 hours. After that, you'll need new audits, if anyone will sign them." No dramatics, no lecture. I didn't offer a pitch deck or smile. I didn't need to. Inside the folder was the map back to credibility, the original system schematic, annotated, signed, verified. My SHA 512 hash seals, time-stamped across 4 cycles, and a sealed reactivation protocol, complete with token pass-through instructions and continuity affidavit guidelines. All the things Grant's dream team never thought to ask for. I didn't wait for their reaction. I didn't want thanks. I turned and walked out the same way I came in. As the door shut behind me, I heard the chair mutter something under his breath. Something clipped. Desperate. No one responded. They couldn't. Because in that moment, every person in that room knew the same truth. This wasn't redemption. This was math, finally arriving for what was owed. And I had simply brought the invoice. They didn't announce it. There were no emails, no statements, no corporate theater to soften the blow. But those who needed to know knew. That night, the board convened again. No press release, no calendar invite with Grant's name. Just 12 people behind a sealed door and one empty chair at the end of the table. Whatever they said, it didn't take long. By morning, Grant was on leave pending review. It was the most polite firing they could dress up. Review meant he was done. Pending meant legal was checking if they could claw back his bonus. I didn't celebrate, didn't feel vindicated, just stared out the window of my small apartment where the sun hit the blinds like it had a schedule to keep. The same way I used to keep the ledger's pulse, quietly, without flair, but always on time. At 8:43 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened. It was the audit committee chair. Her voice was clear, clipped, and, for the first time since this whole mess began, humble. "We'd like to make this right," she said. "We need the system rebuilt from the source, clean, secure, unquestioned." There was no mention of Grant, no excuses about what had happened, just an offer, a contract, triple my old rate, board-level reporting line, no manager, no oversight committee, no alignment meetings, and one title, independent custodian of financial continuity, not analyst, not data lead, not specialist, custodian, the one who holds the keys, the one who stays when others move on. I didn't ask for more. I didn't negotiate. I didn't need to. Because it wasn't about money, not now. It was about the work. And the work had been abandoned, lied about, cheapened, and now it was limping back to the only hands that had ever really known how to carry it. So I accepted. Not for them. Not for the apology that would never come. I said yes because something this important didn't deserve to be broken by someone who thought trust was just a checkbox in a dashboard. It deserved to be protected, and I knew exactly how to do it. The report went out on a Monday. Strategic, timed, deliberate. Every financial partner received a copy by 9:01 a.m. sharp, not an email blast, not a flashy portal update, a direct encrypted transmission. Physical copies delivered by courier in some cases. It wasn't just a document, it was a signal. Inside, beyond the usual metrics and glossed over performance charts, there was a new section. Bolded. Clear. Continuity certification, valid until alteration by custodian. No fanfare, no signatures from 10 departments, just mine. Digitally embedded, time-stamped, cryptographically sealed. The bank saw it and exhaled. slowly but fully. I didn't attend the investor call in person. I didn't need to. They sent me a link to the remote stream and a secure voice channel. I stayed off camera, just a steady voice, grounded, familiar. Halfway through the session, after the usual Q3 projections and strategic repositioning fluff, one investor, an older guy, sharp eyes, the kind who doesn't waste words, asked the question no one wanted to say out loud. Can this happen again? There was a long silence. I let it settle before I responded. Then I leaned into the mic and answered, only if you remove the checksum again. No one replied. No one had to, because they all understood now. The checksum wasn't just code, wasn't just a process. It was a person, a steward, a memory held with discipline, not ego. And they'd tried to replace that with savings, and nearly lost everything for it. 1 week later, the dashboard was reactivated. Same data, new heartbeat. At the bottom, beneath the live financial feed, a new banner quietly pulsed. Ledger integrity, verified by custodian. It updated every 60 seconds, pulling real-time trust from a protocol no one touched but me. I sat alone in my apartment, watching it. Coffee gone cold, window open, and for the first time in months, I felt something like stillness, not satisfaction, not revenge, just clarity. Because data doesn't forget. It records everything. Mistakes, corrections, intent, and somewhere in those ledgers, buried beneath all the numbers and dashboards and audits, was my story too. Data tells stories, and I remember every version.